Kingston Town can't win.
Bonecrusher and our Waverley Star, stride for stride.
Cometh the hour, cometh the legend, Winks has done it.
Joined here by Noel Harris, a New Zealand Hall of Fame jockey, a winner of 45 Group 1 races, including the 1988 Cox Plate. Noel, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, thank you.
Firstly, do you want to just give us a brief rundown of how you got into racing and your pathway into becoming a jockey?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm one of sort of 5 jockeys in our family, like kids-wise, but my dad was a jockey. He had a brother that was a jockey who got killed in a race when he was only about 19. So I'm the third boy, and then there was 4 boys, 2 girls. We all rode, so it was sort of in the blood, if you could say that. And you know, 3 of us were apprenticed to me dad, and one of my brothers, the eldest one, he started with me dad, and he sort of shifted away and got apprenticed to another trainer, Wally McEwen, and so yeah, we were all jockeys and had no choice really.
That's awesome. Must have gotten very competitive.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because Johnny, he was a leading apprentice, and then my brother Desi, he was leading apprentice for a couple of years, and then I came along and I won a couple of apprenticeships as an apprentice and won a major, the National Jockeys Championship. And I probably lasted the longest. Yeah, the others grew up sooner than mainly weight-wise.
Obviously, you're a Kiwi, but you've had a massive amount of success in Australia. When did you first head over to Australia to ride?
It was actually in 70. I'd won the premiership here as an apprentice, 1973, and my dad had Glengowan. He was going for the Melbourne Cup, and I was actually lucky enough that he stuck with me to ride the horse in the Cup, and I went over there probably a month early with Gary Lee. He was out in Mornington, had a horse called Audacity. Won the Fair on him, a horse called Red Boy, won the Pakenham Cup, and so I had about a month there to get prepared for the Melbourne Cup, and lo and behold, Frankie Ray's Gala Supreme beat me a nose, and I was always remembered for the boy who got boy on a man's errand.
And we touched on earlier, you've raced in Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, including premierships in New Zealand and Singapore. What are some of the differences between riding in Asia compared to riding here, both positive and negative?
Yeah, well, Aussie, I think Samika, it's beautiful racing there, and competition-wise and just fantastic jockeys. Singapore was, how would you put it, Singapore and Malaysia, they sort of... You had 3 tracks up in Malaysia and one in Singapore that was a circuit you used to do, and used to get a lot of the English, Irish and jockeys riding there in their off-season. So the competition was really hot, and they always had 6 expats always riding there at one time, so there was no corruption or cut down on the corruption, you would say. But I had 3 years up there, and I won a premiership up there, and it was good money, and I thought it's time to come home and check out Australia, and I can always go back there at any time, back to Malaysia, Singapore. So
that's awesome.
And obviously racing runs in your family, and your son Troy has kind of followed in your footsteps and is riding, and he's actually riding for Tiakau, with the highlight of his career probably being the Group 1 Bonecrusher Stakes on Melody Bell. What's it been like, kind of with him coming through the ranks in racing and kind of teaching him how to be a jockey?
Yeah, it was good. I didn't push him at all. He done motocross for the first year, and then he decided, Dad, I want to be a jockey. So I got him in with Mark Walker and Tiakau. So that was good, and he started riding. He won a premiership, apprentice premiership, and when I was riding still at the time, and first 6 races in tight finishes, I beat him 6-0 it was. And I used to remind him 6-0 Troy, and then he come out and beat me in a Group 1, the 2,000 guineas at Christchurch. So it was a good one to beat me on, his first one, and just felt sorry for Troy in the sense that his weight got away on him. So of late he gets on a vegan diet and he gets his weight down, runs 10Ks, and yeah, he's very sports, Troy, you know, any sport he can play, and it's just the fact that the weight that's probably holding him back, and you know, he's got to have after 2 or 3 months, he's got to have a break from it, mentally wise.
Did you ever have those problems, those weight problems in the saddle?
Yeah, all my life. I started off, I was only 35 Ks, and by the time I was 18, I was 54 Ks. I put a stone a year on. And then from then on, it was always, I was not one for dieting, you know, but I could take weight off in the sauna and, you know, spa baths and stuff like this. So I didn't have issues taking the weight off, but it was just a mental strain. And probably the last 5 years of my career, it sort of come right. But yeah, there was a lot of hungry and thirsty moments.
Can imagine.
So you go, Benny.
Moving into more of the race, the Cox Plate, it's had such a, New Zealand and Australia has such a strong affiliation, especially in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s. How can you best summarise that?
It's something the Kiwis thrive to, the big Melbourne Cup, and like a jockey, it's everybody's dream to win a Melbourne Cup, but always thought that over the years I had 12 in the Melbourne Cup. I had a second, a third, couple of fourths, and I thought if you can't win a Melbourne Cup, Cox Plate's the next best. So, but then I'm thinking that it's such a tactical race, the Cox Plate. It's just, you know, the hairs stand up on your back, and I've never been in a race apart from the Cox Plate that you could be at the 800 or 400 that you got champion horses that are all off the bit, and Kingston Town was just amazing. He was under pressure, long way from home. Then it goes back to the Bonecrusher and Waverley Star race, doesn't it? You know, and not many races you'll get horses under pressure that far from home, except for the Cox Plate.
So in 1987, Poetic Prince was second, and then it was ridden by Gary Phillips that year. And just how keen was John Wheeler to win that race that following year?
I think that was the bait, you know, because he'd won the Caulfield Guineas actually before then, and I rode him then, and he lost it on protest. So John, so we took it on the chin, and I thought, as the old saying, you win some, lose some, but that was a hard loss, that one, and it's like coming back to Australia with unfinished business, and wheels being wheels, he wouldn't let it lie, you know.
And do you want to just elaborate a little bit more on your relationship with him? How did you first get riding for him?
I all started here in New Zealand. John would just ride the odd one or two, and Gary Phillips and David Walsh had a couple of first rides on Poetic Prince, our Poetic Prince. We always come up and said, this horse is not learning anything, it's going to the front, it's not running straight or true, so Harry, we'll put you on, eh? Hence the rest is history, and I just clicked with the horse, and as I said, of all the horses I've ridden over the last 45 years, a champion, I'd have to categorise him in a champion. There's probably a couple others that I could say. A horse that can win on slow tracks, heavy tracks, any distance, ride him anywhere in a race, and Poetic Prince was just one of those horses. Real gentleman, you know.
So that morning before the race there was a bit of drama with Vo Rogue being scratched. Can you run us through a bit of that story on why they were scratched?
Well, I run a apprentice school here, and there was like an assistant mentor was trying to tell the kids that when you go out into the track, you take an umbrella and poke it into the ground to see how. Yeah, and I said, is that correct? I said, the last time, or not actually the last time, but it was always brought to my attention, the owners of O Rogue, morning of the races, they were out there with the umbrella poking it into the track, shook the head and said, no, the track's too. And he was the hot favourite, Bow Rogue. He was going to be hard to beat, but he done me a favour. So every time I see anyone poking umbrellas into the track, I always have a little laugh to myself.
And of course, with Vogue coming out, our Poetic Prince came into favourite, and he was quite strongly backed.
Yep.
How did you feel with like the weight of expectation? A lot of people kind of expected him to be the one to beat once Vogue was out, especially.
Yeah, exactly. It was sort of for a start to see Vogue had come out of the race, and I thought, wow. But I thought a race like this is just not a one horse, you know. So. It was just to the fact that having it's a great just to have a ride in the race, but then being favourite, the pressure builds on you. But once those gates open, tension goes.
That's a nice segue. So the actual race itself, can you talk us through kind of how it unfolded? I think it was almost the perfect ride and went textbook
exactly,
to plan for you. Can you just take us through that race and that ride?
Well, it was like the start before Wayne Trelaw, and he had me on at Caulfield, and I got beat run second, and I led on Poetic Prince. John Wheels wanted me to ride it. I think it's the Caulfield Stakes, or correct me if I'm wrong, but Wayne Trelaw had me on, and I got beat. So come the Cox Plate, and next minute I'm behind, and I thought, you owe me. And as you said, I got such a perfect run. Opened up before the turn, and I said, I'm off now. I'm not waiting around. And having ridden previously into Cox Plates, the pressure goes on from, and to get a run like I did, don't come very often.
And just some of the horses he beat that day, it was Horlicks second and Bonecrusher third. Bonecrusher was obviously a champion. He won the race of the century, and Horlicks went on to win the Japan Cup the next year. How good was it to get the wood over those fellow Kiwis?
Oh, it was fantastic. I rode Horlicks twice and won on her twice, and she was phenomenal, and to see Bonecrusher. And I think with Bonecrusher around, I don't think Poetic Prince got the accolades he deserved, because he went on and won the Tancred after he'd won the Cox Plate. But no, it was just nice to say, oh, this horse beat Bonecrusher and Horlicks, Yeah, it was. As I said, they don't come along every year. A lot of champions, do they?
Do you remember that moment when you came around the turn and the crowd was roaring? Like, we hear from a lot of people and jockeys that when they come around that corner on Cox Plate Day and you've got, that 30 to 40,000 people just screaming and cheering and feeling like they're almost on the track. Do you remember what that was like, and do you still you can still recall that?
Yeah, I can still see it now. And the thing about Poetic Prince, he always pricked his ears as if he'd get to the front, as if he was going to pull up. It was such an awful feeling, and you'd hit him with the stick, and you'd expect he wouldn't give you. But if a horse come beside him, he'd lift. But you hit him with a stick, he wouldn't give any more. And when I hit the turn, hit the front, and with the crowd then, I thought, oh no, he's going to pull up on me. But he didn't. But he had such a, as I said, when he won the Caulfield Guineas the year before, he ran a track record, but he lost on protest. And the steward said if he'd ridden to the line, you'd never have lost it. But he's run a track record, so how fast do you got to go?
Yeah. Obviously, we did speak to you 2 years ago, and we're probably asking some questions that you've already answered many times before. But is there any stories from that period or from the 1988 Cox Plate that haven't been told yet?
Not really. Maybe the celebrations.
Can you elaborate on them, or is that?
Yeah, good. Wheels was good to be a party man, and no, but probably. How would I put it? No, in racing you got a lot of stories to tell, But it took me probably 2 weeks to reflect and I started to pinch myself to say that I won a Cox Plate. And even to this day, I look at other jockeys that have had successes, and when I reflect back, and the success I've had, and just the Cox Plate, as I said, I couldn't win a Melbourne Cup, but the Cox Plate, it's just like, wow,
Just probably one question that we probably haven't asked many people is what that moment after the race where you jump off the horse and the celebrations and what is it like, that immediate moments, and then when you go back into the jockey rooms, like is there camaraderie there from the other jockeys? Do they get around you and support you? What is it like kind of, jumping off that horse and knowing that you're a Cox Plate winner?
Yeah, as I said, it just takes a long time to sink in. At the time you think, well, I've done it, but it doesn't sort of really settle in until, I think probably jockeys' life, they win so many, the good jockeys win big races, and by the time you want to celebrate, it's time to move on to the next race. You just haven't got time really to. It's as you say, it's so competitive, and you can't sit back on your laurels. So.
Yep.
So obviously that Cox Plate victory is high up on your achievement list, but you're also inducted into the New Zealand Racing Hall of Fame in 2018. Can you just give us some memories from that night and where that sits with you also?
Oh, but as I said, I was very humbled, to be with such honourable people in New Zealand racing. And my dad said you only get what you put out into racing, and at that time when I was an apprentice, and sounds like too much hard work, but all of a sudden I was at that evening getting honoured, and same thing again. It's just took a week or two to sink in that you got honoured for the work you put in, the hard work, and I try to make it fun at the same time, and guys like Greg Hall and being mates with Brent Thompson and all those top Aussie jocks that I rode with, and it's just marvellous to reflect back on what a wonderful career it has been riding.
And obviously the Cox Plate is a special race. What do you think makes it so special, and where do you rank it amongst kind of the world's best races?
Well, it's the stakes getting bigger and bigger, and even when was it, 73, I had my first ride in it, I think. I ran fourth on Glengown in the Cox Plate. Even then, it was just a race to be, people in New Zealand, especially New Zealand, talked about. And I think it's grown, and it's, even though the Melbourne Cup's Melbourne Cup, the Cox Plate, as I said, with the stake money now that's available and the top horses that are coming over to race in it, it's fantastic. It's just, it's just a race that, as you said, like the nation, it stops the nation, Australia and New Zealand, come the Melbourne Cup. But the Cox Plate's just got that nice place into it before the lead up to the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah. Obviously, you've had a great career in the saddle. Do you want to just touch on when you retired and what your role in the industry is now?
Yeah, I was lucky that I was. I said to my wife, Kylie, 45 years, I thought I can just walk away from it now, just no pressure, no. She says, it'd be good if you can put something back in, Oh, my. But I'm pleased we sat down and thought, right, apprentice mentor, going to NZTR I said I'd do it as long as I can, my input, if they can run with me, I'd be, more than happy to take the role on or create a role. So besides with my wife and myself, we went to NZTR and put a business plan, how it should be run, and they actually run with it. I'm thinking, they probably won't, but they did. And I'm pleased, because it's clicked in really good, and having to go and support these apprentices on race day and trials, plus the apprentice school package deal. And I think by being the being there for them on race day is such a great help, great asset, and I can see the improvement a lot. And a lot of these young kids starting off, you know.
And you've actually, in 2012, you brought out a biography, Harry, the Ride of My Life. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that kind of all came together?
Yeah, well, I was approached at book and I said, no, I still haven't finished riding yet. And I remember Jimmy Cassidy as well, when he got off about writing the book, he says, I've got to wait for a few people to die before I can put it into words. Just joking, but then I thought, no. And I had a great mate of mine, Wally O'Hearn, that wrote the book for me, that had known me ever since, I was an apprentice, and I thought if he can write this book for me, well, without rushing into it, and he was a great help, and sort of like a happy medium story, without getting carried away. And it's probably, I can probably write another book, but I would not go there after the first one. But it was good to be able to tell the story, especially when it goes back to how we started with the family and with me Singapore and Australia, and it was quite a bit of information to put out there.
I think we might have to purchase the book soon.
Absolutely.
Have a read of it. I think that's all our questions, Noel.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for having us here today. Congratulations on a great career, and good luck with all the apprentices.
No, pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noel.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Alberta Jazz comes up. Starter Mr. King running to the platform. And Impacera, the Caulfield Cup winner, moves to the outside stall, and so the field has assembled for the Wait for Age Championship. Planet Ruler unsteady, and attendant with him. The lights on, they're racing, and the starter sent them away well. Planet Ruler prominent early with our Poetic Prince Flotilla. Bonecrusher's dropped behind them. Impacera going up, Glenview handy. High Regard, then Alberta Jazz Vitalic. Bonecrusher on the inside of him from Horlicks, and Run Straight Run. Bonecrusher reefing and pulling, and Horlicks got a bad check, and so did Run Straight Run at the rear. So they head to the turnout of the straight, and Planet Ruler is the pilot by a length over Impacera on the outside of Flotilla. They're being followed by our Poetic Prince. Glenview the outside, Vitalic on the rails, High Regard. Bonecrusher on the fence, followed by Alberta Jazz, and Run Straight Run on the outside of him, and Horlicks is last of all. Down towards the 1200 metres, they're not going hard, and 8 lengths covers first and last. The Queenslander Planet Ruler leads by a length over Impacera on the outside of Flotilla. Our Poetic Prince and Glenview are together next. 2 lengths High Regard on the outside of Vitalic, a couple of lengths to Alberta Jazz. Bonecrusher's 12 lengths from the lead, and then Run Straight Run, and Horlicks 1,000 to go, and it's Planet Ruler by a half length over Impacera, half length Glenview the outside. Flotilla on the rails, our Poetic Prince on the outside of him with High Regard travelling 3 wide. The tempo has quickened appreciably. 2 lengths Alberta Jazz, and then Vitalic, followed by Bonecrusher, Horlicks, and Run Straight Run. 700 from the judge. Planet Ruler being joined in front by Impacera from Glenview. High Regard the outside. Our Poetic Prince moving up and looking for the way through now. Flotilla urged along on the rails, and then Alberta Jazz, Bonecrusher under the whip. 5 lengths from the lead, Vitalic, Horlicks, and Run Straight Run. Coming to the turn into the straight. Our Poetic Prince into the clear. The favourites bounded up on the outside. Our Poetic Prince hits the front, and around the bend they come, and our Poetic Prince sets sail for the run in nicely clear. Impacera battling away. Bonecrusher finishing stoutly with Horlicks. Our Poetic Prince nicely clear now home. Bonecrusher and Horlicks trying to pick him up, but our Poetic Prince packs too many guns, and it's an all New Zealand finish. Our Poetic Prince has scored by a length and 3/4 from Horlicks. Bonecrusher third, followed then by Run Straight Run, Alberta Jazz Flotilla, Glenview, Planet Ruler, Vitalic, High Regard, and Impacera.